Welcome to this Arnold Clifford knitwear tutorial on knitting using the magic loop method. Magic loop method is a super way of working smaller circumferences on a long circular needle. It's absolutely perfect for scarves that are worked in the round, or hats, socks, mittens, all sorts of different things. And it's especially handy if you've got something that's quite a small circumference and it's going to change circumference, either get bigger or smaller, because you can use this method regardless of how many stitches you've got on the go. In order to work with the magic loop, you're going to need a long circular needle. I would usually recommend using something between 80 and 100 centimetres long, and in inches that would be 32 to 40 inches. You can use much longer if you happen to have that, but it does mean you're going to spend more time pulling cable through your stitches. So I'd say 80 to 100 or 32 to 40 inches is about perfect. So here's how we get started. I've cast on my stitches to my circular needle, my long circular needle, and I've finished casting on, and the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I've not got a twisted cast on edge. So I go all the way along the bottom here where the base of the stitches are, and I just pull them along and make sure it's all nice and flat. I'm then going to literally fold that cast on edge in half. Now, if you're working with a really small number of stitches, you'll need to slide them onto the cable before you do that. But here I've got enough that it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to pinch it so that I can find roughly the halfway point along that cast on edge. It doesn't need to be exact, just needs to be roughly halfway. And at that halfway point, I'm going to pull a loop of cable between the stitches, and I'm going to pull it, making sure I don't pull it out of the stitches I've just cast on. I'm going to pull it until at the front here, where my working yarn is not attached, that was where I started casting on. I'm going to pull it so that those stitches come onto a needle tip as well. So it's now folded in half, and I've got half of the stitches on the front needle and half are on the rear. And at the rear, that's where I've just finished casting off, and that's where my tail, because I was using the long tail method, and my working yarn are attached. So here's my working yarn, and make sure not to get that confused. And then in order to start going with the magic loop, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rear needle, the one the yarn was attached to, and I'm going to pull out a nice loop of yarn so that I can get this needle around to knit with it. And then I'm going to get my working yarn so that that's not got in the way. And all I'm going to do is knit into that first stitch. And by joining that rear stitch on the rear needle with the first stitch on the front needle, I've joined into the round. When I go into the second stitch, I'm just going to give it a little snug to make sure, little tug to make sure it's snug even. And then I'm just going to continue to work across this front needle. Now here I'm just knitting, but if you were doing rib, you'd do the stitches as indicated in your pattern. But you just work across that front section of stitches. And this is the basic setup for magic loop knitting. At the front, closest to me, I've got the stitches on the two needle tips that I'm working on. And then at the rear here, I've got some stitches that are being held on the cable while I work on the front ones. So we're not working on that half, we're working across the front section now. I've just got 2 stitches remaining on my left needle tip, so I'm going to knit them. And this tip is now empty and free on the cable. And you'll see that it's joined into a loop. It's a little bit stretched at the 2 joins at the moment, but that will sort itself out. And all I'm going to do is I've finished working, I'm going to turn it round so that again I've got at the back the needle tip with the working yarn attached to it, and then at the front here I'm just going to pull on the cable at the left so that the front stitches are now on the left needle tip. And now here's my working yarn, and I'm going to pull the rear needle out till I've got enough to reach round and knit into that first stitch on the front. And that's how I'm going to work across the rear stitches. I'm now approaching the end of the round, and I can tell it's the end of the round because there's the tail from the end of my cast on, and as long as I don't move where my loops are, then where I switch from one needle to the other at this point, that will always be the end of the round. So now I do the same thing again. I hold them together, turn it around so that I've got the working yarn attached to that rear needle, and then I'm going to pull on the loop at this end so that that front needle goes into the stitches. So I've got a loop on the left and needle tips here pointing to the right, and then all I need to do is pull that rear one out and bring it round, ready to start knitting across the front again. I'm now going to show you how that looks when you've got a little bit more fabric on your needles. Here's the tube I've been working on, and you'll see that I've got the working yarn here attached to the rear needle when I hold them parallel with both the tips pointing out. So in order to start work here where I've picked it up, I'm taking that rear needle, the one that the yarn was attached to, pulling it out so that I've got a loop, and then I just have to knit into that front stitch. And I continue on my way. We're coming to the end of the row, or the end of the section of stitches on the needles. It's not actually the end of the row. We've come to the end of them. This needle tip is now free as a bird. So we turn around, make that one that the yarn's attached to at the back, pull on the cable so that the front needle's now in the stitches, and pull the rear needle tip out, ready to start working again. I do hope you found that tutorial on working magic loop method helpful. If you find that you're getting tension issues at the change from one needle tip to the other, then do check out our video on the travelling magic loop method. There's a link here, and I'll leave a link in the notes as well. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, then the subscribe button is here so that you're sure to know when we release our next video tutorial. And we're able to create these videos free from adverts thanks to the support of all our customers over at our online shop, which you'll find up top here. Thanks ever so much for watching. Bye bye.